when I hear German, I feel like I'm coming home. Everything I know about English in terms of its construction, its etymology, all through the conduit of foreign languages, everything has come through, for me, German or French primarily. I think it's just the lovely shield that anonymity gives you when you put on another language, and you can become whoever you want to be. The limits of my language are the limits of my world, but I say the limits of my languages are the limits of my world, because they take you anywhere.
This is Word for Word, a podcast about storytellers and the languages that made them. I'm Sophia Smith Galer. I'm a journalist who writes about language. And today we're here to talk about the languages that shaped Susie Dent.
Hello.
Welcome to Word for Word.
Thank you. Joy to be here.
And welcome to Casa Italiana.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
So this is where I host a monthly Italian language bar. This is a very important building in terms of my family history and the context of Little Italy, which was in Clerkenwell, and that's why you can hear traffic outside, because we're right next to Clerkenwell Road. It's a community centre.
It's gorgeous. And I will give you one of probably 4 Italian phrases that I know, which is andiamo a mangiare subito.
Ah, va bene, andiamo. Susie Dent, many people will know you as an author, as a lexicographer, as a broadcaster, as the face of Dictionary Corner. Have I missed anything?
Nah, that'll do.
And Word Nerd.
Word Nerd, always. Yes, actually, you should put that first.
And you and I, in theory, could record this all day.
We could.
And we'd still have things to talk about.
We are fellow nerds, geeks, twats, all of them.
The first question I like to ask on this podcast is, what's the story behind your name? Because I feel like it's the origin story of language for everyone, and you don't have a choice about it. So, no. Susie, what does Susie Dent mean?
Well, Susanna, I think in Hebrew means lily, which I'm quite happy with. And Dent, now there's two ways we can go on this one. Either it's a topographical surname, so it's based, I think, Dent in Yorkshire, which I've never visited, and I must. So it's either that my ancestors came from there, or it could have been, after the Norman conquest, a French noble who came over and had slightly wonky teeth, or a prominent teeth of some description because of the Dein aspect.
I said to my team, I was like, has it got anything to do with dentistry?
Yeah, maybe. So I'm not completely sure. I sort of prefer the first option, but who knows?
And what are the languages that shaped you?
First and foremost, German. My first love, my enduring love. It's something I have defended all my life because it doesn't have a very good reputation. And French, probably. Those two for me. And of course, English. I came to English slightly late in my life in terms of what I do now, etymology and lexicography, and came in totally through modern languages. That's what I published. That's why I studied at university. And when I went to Oxford University Press to work on their dictionaries, I was an assistant editor on their bilingual dictionaries.
Please, could you introduce yourself in one of your languages or both?
Ich heiße Susie Dent, ich bin Lexicographin und ich freue mich sehr, hier zu sein.
Dankeschön.
Bitte.
I didn't know what you just said.
In Italian, do they have, in French, if someone gives a negative statement and you want to say, so it's like you want to disagree with it, but it's a negative. So they have si. Or in German, it's like, I would say, kommst du nicht heute? You're not coming here today. And you'd say, doch. Yes, I am. So it's a yes, but it's a yes to a negative statement. Do they have that in Italian? I wish we had that.
The first thing that's come to mind is something in Spanish, which is instead of saying me neither, you go yo tampoco, which is not a negative.
Okay. What is that?
Well, it is a negative, but it isn't constructed like a
But it's a response to a negative.
Yes.
Yeah. I wish we had that in English.
Let's start with German.
Yeah.
And why you feel like it has this reputation. What did you mean by that?
Well, you are a lot younger than me, Sophia, but when I was growing up, telling my grandmother, for example, that I was learning German, and she'd grown up obviously during the war, was not something that she was particularly delighted about. And she was open to it. She wasn't prescriptive at all. But I had to tell her why I loved it so much and how German now is often misrepresented. I mean, certainly she grew up, understandably, with films that just showed German as being a sort of language that was barked out by fairly despicable people. And having lived in Germany and having experienced so much of the guilt and the remorse that exists there, and so much of the attempt to atone on the part of so many people, particularly the younger generations, I was able to kind of come back and share that with her a little bit. But certainly when I was studying it as a teenager, it wasn't really the go-to language.
What was it about German that drew your attention towards it?
It's so rhythmical, it's lyrical, it has depths that I think are often overlooked. So I always quote, and I wish I could find the original quote, because I haven't been able to, but I think it was Goethe, I'm not completely sure, the great German author, who compared English to a country garden, French to a beautiful park, and German to a deep, gnarly wood. And that, for me, is exactly what it is. It has so many depths. I think today we celebrate it because it's one of those languages that seems to have a word for everything. And we always say, yeah, I bet German has a word for that, because it's like Lego. You can construct it at will. You can build these incredible compounds. But it's so much more than that. And I love the sound of it. And weirdly, I've never been able to explain this. When I hear German, I feel like I'm coming home. But I have no idea why. It's just, and you I guess, have a more obvious tie to other languages because through your sort of family. I don't have any of that. I have, as far as I know, just sort of, classic British ancestry. But it just feels soothing to me and like an oasis. And when I listen to German radio, I just sort of like, it's a strange one.
English is a West Germanic language.
It is a Germanic language, yeah.
I wonder if any of that was part of its kind of silent intrigue to you when you were drawn to German.
Possibly. I mean, I didn't know that explicitly. I didn't know that our roots are heavily Germanic, because at school I never learnt the history of English. In fact, everything I know about English in terms of its construction, its etymology, its grammar, I go, and constructions, all through the conduit of foreign languages. So everything has come through, for me, German or French primarily. And so I'm so pleased that I had those as bedrocks. I did Latin very speedily as an O-level, that's how old I am, so that I could get into an American university because they required Latin. So I did a speed course on Latin, which I absolutely love. But I think obviously so many people think that we are a French and Latin language at heart. But as you say, its roots are Germanic. And then, of course, we had, thanks to the Normans, a huge influx of French words, many of which originated with Latin and then further back Greek. So, it's such a mishmash. I mean, that's the joy of English. But yeah, maybe it was a recognition of that affinity. I'm not sure. I can't really put my finger on it. It was much more, without sounding really cheesy, it was a bit more kind of mystical than that for me.
English is a bunch of different languages standing on top of each other in a trench coat.
Yes.
That's how I like to think about English.
Yeah, that's true.
You studied languages at university. That's when it sort of consolidated for you. And was that German and French, or just?
It's German and French.
Yeah. Okay.
Ask me, if you would speak to me in French, though, because I've never really lived there for very long, I will probably sound like Balzac or Zola or whatever, because I was so steeped in older literature that much of my vocabulary comes from there. So I am totally oblivious to modern French slang.
So this love of languages materialised into a degree in French and German.
Yes. And
what made you pick those?
Purely the accident of school and the languages I was introduced to. I really envy pupils today who have a chance to select from other languages. That wasn't really an option for me, although, as we know, the study of foreign languages is really ebbing away at schools, and that's so sad. But had I had a different range to choose from, I probably would have gone elsewhere, apart from German. I mean, I just knew that's what I wanted to do. I had a brilliant teacher. I just found it was at a sweet spot in my life, and I think I was really receptive to learning it. I'm very drawn to the written word as opposed to the way, and I think you might be different from me, because a lot of people find immersive linguistic training really useful.
I would be one of those people, yes.
I am the opposite. So I was really discombobulated by my French teacher, who would come in and not speak a word of English from start to finish. And I couldn't see anything written down, and I really panicked quite often. Whereas with German, it just felt much more... The teaching somehow was more methodical, and we were immersed in it, but we also studied the written word much more, which helped. I remember going on a Russian course, a day-long Russian course. It was a sort of experimental thing at Oxford, and we didn't see anything written down because it was in Cyrillic and we hadn't learned the alphabet, but we just heard Russian coming at us the entire time. I knew very little by the end of it, maybe one sentence, whereas other people were just... Yeah, so that's just the way my mind works, and sometimes I wish it worked differently, that I could just pick it up through sound.
In all of the languages I've studied, bar one, my reading and writing are my best skills.
Right.
So I completely relate to what you're saying in that I feel like I have more control and understanding with writing and reading. Yeah. And I don't really know why. And it's always with listening and speaking that things begin to spiral out of comprehension.
Yeah.
But Italian... I am far better at listening, especially. And I guess, my reading and writing aren't bad. And my speaking's getting better. But I think that's because I was only exposed to Italian as spoken around me.
Of course.
That it ended up imprinting the sort of linguistic skill set in my head.
And from childhood, presumably.
Yeah, differently.
Yeah.
But it's important to acknowledge that everyone approaches learning a language differently.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I'd be really game for... trying out other methods, and there's so many brilliant apps out there nowadays. There's so much to learn, isn't there? I'm really fascinated by Japanese at the moment.
Japanese is really cool.
So cool. And I'm sure we'll come on to this, but they have so many gorgeous, gorgeous words that just are so much more than the sum of their parts. They're incredible.
I had to learn some Japanese for my honeymoon.
And how did that go?
What do I remember? I remember I wanted to learn enough Japanese to be polite, because I know
to understand what was coming back at you. That's the key, isn't it?
I know that culturally it's so important to almost this like call and response of gratitude and knowing the right thing to say where.
Yeah.
Arabic is very similar in that respect. It's a lot of, I say one thing and there's a very specific response to that one specific phrase. Yeah. And I knew I wanted to do the same for Japanese. So I mainly I remember learning 1 to 10. Please, thank you. That's what I was obsessed with learning. And apparently when you're saying thank you, you can't really just use a couple of syllables. It has to be the full phrase. And it's true that in Japan, I never heard anyone go arigato and say nothing else.
Right.
It was always arigato gozaimasu.
Yeah. What does that mean? Thank you for...
Possibly. It's just...
For something, yeah.
But you have to say the whole phrase as a thank you.
Right.
In order to be fully polite.
I'm slightly obsessed with saying sorry in different languages because they're so heavy. They're quite sort of dramatic. So sorry obviously linked to sorrow in English, but in German it's Entschuldigung, which is relieve me of guilt. Take the guilt away from me. And it's the same with being pardoned, isn't it? And then pardonnez-moi or whatever. And I find that, and je suis désolée. It's like I'm desolated. It's there's so much weight from expressing sorrow. Excuse me, again, the idea of sort of taking guilt away from somebody, and yet we just chuck it around.
In Spanish, it's I feel it.
I love that.
Lo siento.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so that and that is all you need to say sorry.
Yes, but if you said lo siento without the frequency that you say it in English, as a native English speaker, how we say it for everything. Sorry.
Shopping trolley, yeah.
Spanish speakers would look at you strangely.
Yes, same in German actually. Yeah, Germany. I think we're quite weird in that respect.
What took you into lexicography? Was it your first job out of university?
Out of university, yes. I mean, I waitressed for ages, all the way through university and things. Worked in a porter's lodge when I worked in America to try and get myself through it. But so I came back from the States where I'd studied German again and comparative literature, and then I applied to so many different publishers. So it was by no means a given that I was going to use my languages. I applied for editorial jobs, lots and lots of different places, didn't get any. And the first place that took me seriously was Oxford University Press, as I say, to work on their bilingual dictionaries. So I was complete novice. I had the sort of slightly cheesy, daydreamy belief that I was going to be surrounded by books and that's all I wanted to do. But obviously, lexicography is a very specific craft, and I did work on the publishing side as well, so that was fascinating. So I kind of got to know about, profit margins and book covers and blurbs and that kind of thing. So it was brilliant. But yeah, it was my first job, proper job.
I think people would be surprised to hear that some of the first dictionaries you handled were not in languages that you speak.
No. So I worked on a Russian dictionary, couldn't speak a word of Russian, Serbo-Croat as it was then, Hungarian. I learned about the different Hungarian dialects. So it was a whole new world to me, but there were people other than me, obviously, who were textually analysing and editing and reviewing. At that point, I was more concerned with how it was going to look, how each entry would be, the furniture for each entry. So how much information we gave, whether we gave etymologies and that kind of thing. So it was still textually based, but it wasn't checking the accuracy of the language, because obviously I couldn't do that.
And we're talking about bilingual dictionaries there?
Yeah, we are.
So did you stick to that? What happened next after doing those dictionaries?
So I did stick with that for a long time, and then also took some English dictionaries under my wing. And then, and it is as for me as romantic as this. I just remember I had an office quite high up in quite the old Oxford University Press building, which actually crops up in my novel, albeit under a different name.
Yes.
And so it was a bit like sitting in a garret. It was incredibly rainy, had the rain beating against the windows. And the predecessor in my office had a copy of Walter Skeat's etymological dictionary, and I just took it down off the shelf while I was eating my sandwich. And genuinely, that was such a turning point to me. For me, I was just lost in all these stories, and so I would dip into it whenever I could. So that was when I first thought, actually, do you know what, this is just amazing. But I was in my mid-20s at that point, so much later than my discovery of German and French.
In order for a new word to be added to the Oxford English Dictionary, for example,
yeah,
it's just frequency.
Well, for the Oxford English Dictionary, it's slightly different. So, understandably, there is some confusion between the Oxford Dictionary and the Oxford English Dictionary. So, the one we use on Countdown is a current dictionary. Words can go in and come out. They are primarily based on frequency, and they will be studied. They will have to have shown some kind of longevity. They will be the sort of words that people will want to look up. So that's a current English dictionary. The Oxford English Dictionary, which is my Bible, is a historical dictionary. It's based on historical principles, but it is almost bang up to date. I say almost because in order for a word to go in, it is studied a little bit longer than it would be for a current dictionary because, and this is the joy of it, Sophia, once a word goes in the OED, it never comes out. So there are some singletons, which I talk about in my story, which are only recorded once, and they're the most exquisite ones, like apricity, which I talk about all the time, the warmth of the sun on a winter's day, like respair, fresh hope, a recovery from despair. One record, 1628, has never gone out again. And they're some of the best entries in the world, and they are permanent records, so we know that they were around at some point, and hopefully some of them will come back. But so the criteria are slightly different, and there are different teams working on the two dictionaries, although they collaborate, obviously.
If someone were to say a word, and then the person they're speaking to says, that's not a word, and maybe even backs it up by saying that's not in the dictionary, what would you say to that?
I'm not. So some people would have me out to be a complete linguistic hippie and to say anything goes and you can do whatever you like with language and it's fine. Every family has its own little idiosyncrasies and their own wonderful tribal shorthand for things, which is really important. It's family slang and it's a wonderfully unifying thing. But in order for us to communicate with beauty and to be articulate, the other person has to sort of have a measure of understanding. So if somebody completely trashes the standard meaning of a word, it will be that sort of communication is sort of already stumbled because the other person is going to be focusing on that. So it makes sense to have a standard, but the whole point about modern lexicography is that we are charting English as it evolves. So there may be evolutions that we don't like, and that will be the case for so many of us, whether people resist the influx of American English, which most of the time isn't actually US English to begin with, but that's another story, or whether it's modern slang, or whether there's just been an article out today about how old terms for sex, like rumpy pumpy, etc., are not being understood anymore by younger generations, and so they're coming up with things that are sort of slightly more full frontal. There are so many things that some of us lament, but English has always gone on its own merry way. And as I always say, Shakespeare was criticised by his contemporaries for mucking about with language, and look how we view him now. So lexicography is all about description. Having said that, it's important to be as clear and as articulate and as eloquent as you can be, and for that you do need some kind of standard structure.
Bring back rumpy pumpy is what.
Bring back rumpy pumpy.
I got from that.
Yeah, that was just so older generations will be wistful about the loss of things like that. Same with insults, actually, muppet and plonker and tosspot and things. People are like, oh, these are all going away. I love them.
But why are people so resistant to language change? I understand the loss of words you feel some kind of attachment to.
Yes.
Right now, I'm actually thinking about new coinages.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, you will see people have a moan about them.
We always have. I think any generation will forget the fact that they had their own slang that their parents resisted and felt annoyed by, and so then feel the same irritation towards modern slang because they don't quite understand it, and it's part of another group, and it reminds you that you're other, you're not inside the group, and it's designed to keep outsiders at bay. So there's a level of frustration at that. Having said that, I think we're all fascinated by new words, whether we love them or hate them. And, I think many of us or most of us will recognise that things have to move on. But, there are so many bugbears that people will name, whether it's mispronunciations or pronunciations, as a lot of people now say, or whether it's punctuation changing and the loss of the semicolon, which is a personal sadness of mine. It will move on and it will leave things behind. The only reassurance that I can offer is that English particularly is very circular. So what went out of fashion at one point may well come back in. And you only have to look at adjectives like fab, for example. A lot of people will be picking that up now. It is quintessentially 1960s and went away for a while. So we dip in and out, and language is as prone to fashion as our clothes. It's our wardrobe.
We do not have very long until this book, How to Kill a Language, is going to be available in shops to buy. By the end of this century, it's estimated that roughly half of the world's languages may no longer be with us. I travelled the world, or as much of the world as I could, in an attempt to try and document why this is happening, investigating some of the causes, and also thinking about how could it be stopped? It will mean the world to me if you're able to pre-order it. David Crystal, the renowned linguist, just very kindly said that this is the best book on language endangerment that he's ever read. And I can't quite believe that he said that, and I'm very honoured. But this will be available very soon. It will really help the book if you can pre-order it. And that's not only a way to support this book, it's a way to support the Word for Word podcast as well. So if you have the time, it would really mean a lot to me if you would be able to pre-order it. How can you pre-order it? You can head to the description where you'll find a bunch of different links depending on where you want to pre-order it from. You wanted a career surrounded by books.
Yeah.
You have had that career.
I have.
But you've also been on TV loads.
Yeah.
So what happened? What got you out of being surrounded by these sort of weighty tomes on bookshelves to suddenly finding yourself on a TV set?
That was in the form of my boss. Well, I had a lovely boss, Rob, and his boss was Simon, who was in charge of the whole department. And he was the one who explained that Oxford University Press, OUP, had an arrangement with ITV, who made a programme called Countdown for Channel 4, which of course I was aware of. Everyone was aware of that. Been going for 10 years by then. And he said they're looking for lexicographers, people to represent the dictionary, to be a referee, etc. Would you be interested? And no, I absolutely wasn't interested. Just wasn't really on my radar. I'm quite happy just where I was. So I said no quite a few times. It just wasn't on my radar, actually. I was quite happy doing what I was doing. He subsequently explained they really needed people and it would be good for my job and my career prospects. So I went up and honestly, it's lost in the midst of time now, but I think I sat in for a couple of rounds or maybe just sat in the corner for 10 minutes or so. And then they just threw me straight in and they said, fine, yeah, we'll have you. So I can't remember if it was that day or whether I came back again, but my first show was with Viralect. Had no clue what I was doing. And I'm sitting there like this, looking on the face of it, I feel very arrogant, but actually was terrified. And that was that. And that was 34 years ago now. So the show's been going for 44 years and I came, 10 years in. So, but at that point, important to say, I was one of many. It wasn't just me at all. There were many of us who went in. So I could still do my day job.
I imagine there are lots of lexicographers who work with English language materials and only speak English. But do you think your French and German have helped you? Hugely,
particularly German, I would say, because there are so many siblings in language that you can recognise. French too, though, obviously because of the Latin element as well, and they are I just find them invaluable. But I think any foreign language really will open up unexpected secret lives in your own language, and they often say, don't they, to understand any culture fully you need to understand the language. I mean, that's just a given, but yeah, it has helped me hugely. In fact, I'm not sure I would be doing what I was doing had it not been for my modern languages.
How does French speaking or German speaking Susie differ to English speaking Susie?
Yes, very good question. In French, I think I become a little bit cooler, slightly more hesitant because I feel like I don't have the colloquial language that I should have. So I would need to immerse myself in that to be fully au fait with everything. But yeah, I think I become a slightly cooler person. In German, I'm more confident.
Interesting.
And slightly more playful, I would say.
Is that because you feel like the language invites you to access that? Or do you feel like you are mimicking the Germans who've been around?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. Certainly with the French and the coolness. I mean, that's just so stereotypical. But yeah, you just kind of assume this flair. With German, I think definitely a mixture of both. German is quite a playful language, despite what everyone says that Germans don't have a sense of humour. Boy, do they have a good sense of humour, and it's very dry. But I think it's just the lovely shield that anonymity gives you when you put on another language, and you can become whoever you want to be. It's just the most wonderful retreat, but also, if you want it to be, a kind of public display of a different side of yourself. So there's nothing comparable, I think, with that, and that the freedom it gives you to be someone that you aren't. I often compare it to, within every family, I think each member has a particular role or is seen as a particular way. So for me, I was always the daydreamy one, clumsy one. So it became a self-fulfilling prophecy that whenever my dad saw me with a cup of coffee, I would spill it because that's what he expected me to do. I wouldn't do it in any other arena. So you kind of slot into that expected role. Even if you're in your 50s and 60s, you're still that person. If you are speaking another language, none of that matters. You are who you are at your core, I think, and you just can take on another mantle, the one that maybe is your alter ego throughout your life. So it's so special. That, and I think if you ask me for the biggest joy of another language, apart from understanding a completely different side of life, really, I think it is that ability to be someone else.
Is there anything,
or yourself, but someone else?
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
There's that quote: every language you learn, you acquire sort of a new personality.
Yeah. How are you when you speak Italian? Who are you?
I use my hands a lot more.
Yes.
it's that peculiar area of, am I acculturating to what I've seen Italians do? Or is it that by speaking this language, it's unlocking something that's always been there within me? And I definitely think I use, in both Spanish and Italian, but especially in Italian, I'll use terms of endearment way more.
Okay.
Because I've been given so many terms of endearment by the Italians in my life, by the fact that it's a heritage language that surrounds me.
And is that towards your family, or is it towards people in general? Is it the
People in
equivalent
general.
of love or dear or babe, or, you know, some people use those so loosely that they can apply it to anyone. Is it that kind of level?
Every Sunday, I sing in the choir next door every Sunday, and I'll be called tesoro every time.
Treasure.
Yeah, and I've noticed
That's that treasure.
I am now, I'm passing it on. I'm doing it to people as well.
In Italian only.
In Italian only. I would never, I don't really say darling or stuff like that in English.
No.
And
What about to your husband?
I just call him Luke.
So there's you don't use Italian.
No, I really
epithets.
notice it. Actually, I use it a lot with children in Italian as well.
Yeah.
Again, because Italian culture is well known for its adoration and welcoming of children.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it's really easy for me to access that in Italian, perhaps even more so than it is to access it in English, a language in which I've spent less time, perhaps especially recently with kids. I think it's not that I acquire a sudden new personality, it's that I get to access a part of myself that maybe, had I not learnt that language,
would have stayed hidden.
Yeah.
I know, it's fascinating.
Is there anything you really like saying in French or German that you feel like you can only really express properly in that language?
Yes, I'm going to give you an example from both, and I can never quite find the English equivalent. So if you're overwhelmed by something in French, you might say you're bouleversé, or something is bouleversant. And I can't, it's just that thing of being completely knocked over that just I can't quite express in English powerfully enough. And in German, it's a weird one. I mean, there's so many untranslatables in German, it's gorgeous. But it's strapaziert, which is hair that is sort of frizzy and dry and sort of like, if you have been in the sun too much or whatever, and you just want to say, oh, my hair is just so strapaziert. I just can't find the equivalent for that. So yes, and they come to me sometimes, and it's quite useful when I'm driving. It's quite a nice thing to just chew over in your head, like what would be the exact synonym. And of course, as we know from the untranslatables, quite often there aren't any. I wanted to ask you about the idea of sound symbolism and whether you, this is quite a deep question, but whether you think topography actually influences a language, because there is a theory that the sort of Mediterranean climate and the sunshine and the blue skies produce more sibilant sounds in the languages there, whereas Nordic languages or languages further north are sort of full of the sounds of like cracking firs and cold and a kind of harder and more guttural. I just find it such a fascinating idea, and it just whether or not we naturally attune the sound of our languages to our environment.
You might be onto something, or this linguist, whoever is responsible for it, might be onto something.
Yes,
I know.
I think this was a while ago.
My comment section will help us answer it. So if you speak a language in either a hot place or a cold place, tell us if you think this checks out. It has reminded me of an anecdote from back when I would have been 20 or 21 in an Arabic class in Beirut. And I have never forgotten this teacher telling me that words with a very particular letter in Arabic having kind of 3 H sounds. So if I just explain what they are first, you've got a h sound like in English, like horse. You then have sort of phlegmy that is a bit similar to, I think,
German, quite German.
Yes,
Germanic,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's one in between that I remember my Yemeni professor saying, imagine that you're trying to blow mist onto a car window or your glasses. So it's al-hanin or al-hub.
Oh, I love that.
So it comes from
further back.
Yeah, a different place in the mouth. And so both of those words, al-hanin, pretty sure that's nostalgia. Might have to check that. Al-hub, love. And he said that ha sound is associated with deep emotion when used in Arabic.
There's just so much. Just the lexicon for deep emotion in Arabic is phenomenal, isn't it?
Yes. There are loads of words for love in varying degree.
A favourite word discovery, which you will know, and I don't know quite how to pronounce it. It's the T-A-R-A-B, tarab.
T-A-R-A-B?
Yes.
Tarab. Yeah.
Which is the kind of collective euphoria felt when an audience and a musician are together and hear the music. It's just it's kind of collective appreciation and sort of deep, profound connection with music. I just love it. Anyway, yes, it's gorgeous language.
But gosh, to do a study of what you've just described, a linguist would have to get all of the languages that we have done any kind of scientific study on, and then maybe balance it with like temperature data, which is then also hard because temperatures are changing around the world.
Maybe it's as much environment as climate. So the sort of, your sort of surroundings.
Like mountainous.
And that sort of hard versus soft. It's fascinating. But as gnarly, I suspect, as do we shape our language or does our language shape us? That's an eternal question.
I made a video recently about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is what you're describing.
Exactly
because people get really angry about it online.
What's your conclusion?
Well, it's not up to me what the conclusion is, but linguists largely agree with a very weak version of it, so that it's not the case that a language determines how we speak, because then you infer that your language may even limit how you speak, and that's not the case. The case is more that a language may influence what we immediately notice or what we start observing as habit. And that's why there are these studies where speakers of certain languages that have more regularly used names for different shades of blue, in a study where you're literally only talking about shades of blue, are they going to notice or define some of them more quickly? Yeah, kind of, because it's a bit of habit, it's a bit of how much is this the culture that you're from as well as the language that you speak. It's why it's so thorny.
Yes, exactly. It's like the Inuit words for snow.
Yes. Perfect example.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Susie, it is now time for a quiz.
You didn't tell me about this. Okay.
Because good news, the objective is that I try and deliver you a language fact you've never heard of.
Oh, good, okay.
Now,
well, that's easy.
Well, impossible for me if my target is to try and give Susie Dent a language fact she's never heard of.
Trust me, I am right at the beginning of my knowledge journey. There's just so much more to learn, even on English. I mean, if you ask me for an etymology, I'd probably be okay. But the vast subject that is other languages, just you hit me with it.
So it's called Words Fail You.
Okay.
And I've prepared 3 language facts.
Yeah.
And my objective is to try and get one you've never heard of before.
Okay. I suspect all 3. Yeah.
Susie, you are known for your work on Dictionary Corner. Mm-hmm. But why does Spanish have 2 words for corner?
First of all, Dictionary Corner is not actually a corner, so it's a bit of a misnomer in Countdown. Okay, so why does Spanish have 2 words for corner? Is this to do with, in English we have many, many words for the same thing because they've all come at us through different languages? Is it the idea of filtering from different languages and essentially they both mean the same thing? Or is it something more geometrically inclined about corners? Is it whether it's a left-hand corner or a right-hand corner? I just don't know.
No, but I love the way that you're thinking. And I found a fact that you didn't know about.
I promise you, there'll be all 3. Yeah, carry on.
So, a corner, there are 2 words for corner in Spanish because it depends what side of the corner you're on.
Okay, yeah.
So, a corner, if I've got the table here, out looking there, it's an esquina. Mm-hmm. But if I were here looking there, it's a rincón.
And is that because of the sort of different visual perspective? That's quite useful for building. Why do they need that precision, do you think? I wonder what led to that.
I wonder what led to that as well.
Yeah.
I do also wonder if there are different etymologies. I'd have to look into it.
It might be.
So you could have been right and I just didn't know.
We famously have so many doublets in English because we took on a French word that sounded elevated and lofty when French was very fashionable. and we kept the Old English word as well. So, for example, rude was Old English for a cross, and then we took cross from French. Or we have guarantee and warranty that pretty much mean the same thing, but both come from different languages. So there are so many examples of that.
That's really
in
cool.
our language. Yeah. So I wonder if they've come in from different. But the fact that they have been selected to mean different things is very interesting.
Question number 2. Okay. According to UNESCO's Index Translationem, who is the most translated author in the world?
Oh. Okay, so obvious example would be Shakespeare. Obvious answer.
Shakespeare is in the top 10 when I had a look.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the top one. And the reason I have asked you this is because I think you have something in common with the author.
Most translated, so it's not going to be a dictionary. Something in common. Tolkien.
No.
Although he worked on the OED.
No.
Well, Shakespeare's in there.
You have, because you've started writing this kind of novel, you have an awful lot in common with her.
J.K. Rowling.
Agatha Christie.
Agatha Christie. Oh, I love that. Seriously, yeah, I guess that's more than Shakespeare.
More than Shakespeare.
Wow. What a woman. I mean, I feel like she's just permanently underestimated, really, because, you know, she's sort of seen as sort of churning out story after story, even though we all love them and we cherish them. But they're some of them are quite dark. And when it comes to sort of human emotion in there, you've got the whole spectrum. So good for her.
We'll get on to your book, because your book is quite dark as well.
Yes.
Question number 3.
Yeah.
German is famous for its glorious compound words, where it sort of just lumps noun after noun after noun after noun.
Yeah.
But what is the longest word in German?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, there would be so many. What would be the longest one? Hit me with it. It's some job title, isn't it? Or
okay, so I don't speak German.
Okay, so do you want me to read it out?
Hang on, I want to play
give it a
first.
go.
Let me play.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's 3 lines.
Rindfleische-Tickettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz.
This is something about a law to do with butchers.
Yes. So it's beef labelling supervision duties delegation law, and it was invented in the 90s regarding mad cow disease.
So Rindfleisch-Etikettierungsüberwachungsaufgabenübertragungsgesetz. Do you know what? I suspect that's probably been made up to be the longest word, much like flocky knocky, nihilification, and all the other ones that people throw at them. They were deliberately invented to be the longest word. So it might be slightly fanciful, but who knows? It might there be in the law books.
I also want to give you that point because, as you've just described, in theory, there is no longest word in German.
No, because you can just build and build and build. And as German is a democracy like ours, we can, anything goes. Yeah.
But the reason that one makes lists of longest words is because it's 63 letters.
Yeah.
So I've seen in numerous places it's often considered to be one of the longest official words, but obviously barely used.
Yes. And official is always, like what makes something official. I'm so often asked, why doesn't this word exist? Why is it not in the dictionary? I say, it exists. It's just not used frequently enough to be put in the dictionary.
This is a Viralect original podcast, but did you know we don't only make podcasts? Viralect is the company that I set up a year ago, and it's where I do all of my social media and journalism innovation. That includes making brand new tools for journalists. It also includes the vertical video training and workshops that I deliver. So if you want to support this podcast, as well as listening to it, as well as sharing it, there are other things that you could do, like, for example, try out one of my tools. You could try Sophiana, which is an iOS app that helps journalists and experts amplify their work on algorithms on TikTok and Instagram by letting you turn your work into scripts and then giving you a teleprompter to film them straight away. You can get a free month, actually, if you use the code word for word. Just head to the link in the description to download it. Editors always tell me off for using too many semicolons.
I love semicolons. I use them all the time in my book. Yeah, we need to stand up for the semicolon.
which I want to talk about because it's amazing.
That wasn't a big plug.
No, I want to talk about it. Look, the audience can see where I've gotten up to.
Thank you.
It is a mystery, a crime mystery. I don't yet know, actually, if it's a murder mystery or not, so I'm not spoiling anything. But what made you want to write not only a novel, but a mystery?
Had it not been for the editor of that book, Kelly, had it not been for her approaching me, it would not have existed. So I'd love to say that this novel has been inside me for 20 years. And I have worked on screenplays just for my own private pleasure. But when I was at school, I entered a short story competition for the school magazine, and I wrote this ridiculously breathy short story about someone being chased through the woods. Loved it. Got into the magazine. I think it was one of my father's proudest moments. And he would always say to me, why don't you write another story? Throughout my life. And I would always say, Dad, I'm just really happy doing what I'm doing. So many stories in dictionaries, etc. Enough magic and drama to last a lifetime. And then Kelly came to me and said, would you consider writing this? And rather like Countdown, I said no. And then it really just sort of ticked away below the surface. And I thought, you know what, that would be really fun. And I just thought there are so many dark secrets in the dictionary. Well, not dark, but just sort of secret stories in the dictionary that are actually trying to compare that to crime in some way. And etymologists are word detectives, after all. That's what we often call ourselves. So actually mirroring true detection was really appealing. So it was thanks to her. I think without that catalyst, it probably would have remained unwritten.
I want to know how much Martha is based on you.
A lot. Yeah, she's very autobiographical. She's a complete daydreamer. She lives in her head, very happy in her own company. She's different though. I did try and distinguish this a little bit because she's not a worrier, really. She doesn't gnaw away at things in her head. She just lives there sort of, not that all her thoughts are happy ones, but she doesn't really care two hoots about what other people think of her. So I deliberately wanted to make that because that's what I aspire to. So there are aspects that are quite different. But other than that, she's pretty much me as I was in my 30s. And
she appears in the next one.
Yeah.
So what can you reveal at the moment about Death Writ Large?
Death Writ Large is, Martha returns. It's set in Oxford again. And this time it involves graffiti. So I became really interested in the history of graffiti through reading a lovely book by Madeleine Pelling about its history and how it was once just ordinary conversation. It was just using the walls as another canvas. And it wasn't seen as the language of rebellion. It sort of crossed that threshold later on. So if you go back to Pompeii, famously, there are just sort of quite obscene examples of graffiti. And I find it absolutely fascinating how it is, again, a sort of secret language, really. And so I'm using that as a bit of a new way of communicating to the lexicographers. And I think the plot is that's still the hardest thing. It's the when it comes to fiction, the plotting is obviously everything.
But do you know you know the solution before you start writing or not?
No. A lot of people will tell you, oh yeah, I had no idea where it was going to go and the characters just led me through the pages, and I love that. Such a romantic notion. It's not quite like that for me, but in terms of what the denouement is going to be and how I'm going to frame that linguistically, because there are a lot of puzzles in there and cryptic clues and that kind of thing, that I work out as I go along, and it is quite a complicated task. But the actual writing of it, I love. It is as much of a sanctuary for me as the dictionary.
Was there a language that got away?
I think Spanish is the one that is always getting away. I learnt it or tried to learn it during lockdown, and then, as probably the case with so many people, it just was overtaken. So I think that's the one that is sort of just at the margins of my memory and my knowledge, and that I want to kind of pull it into the fold.
I think it wouldn't take you very long because of your French and your Latin.
I hope not. I'm just not sure that for one thing, I can't roll my R's. Apparently this is a genetic thing. So with Italian, obviously, that's what I just can't do it. And that is one of the regrets of my life. Don't ask me to do it. I've actually got braces on my bottom teeth, so it would all go horribly wrong. But I can't do it.
There are some accents in Italian that don't really roll the R either.
Okay, so I could just say that I come from a particular...
A really specific part of, I think, in the north, yeah.
Okay,
I don't think
good.
it's far from where my family's from, yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, I just can't do it. Much as I try.
But of course, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't learn Spanish or any language with a rolled R. Because even with Arabic, there are so many letters they felt impossible to me to pronounce in the very beginning. And some of them now I feel quite confident with. Some of them I have a 50% success rate, whether I'll hit it or not. But I know that the speaker will understand what I'm trying to get at.
I guess so. I guess it's just the sort of purist in me that just wants to be authentic and not have to tiptoe around certain words. But you're right, that should not be an obstacle.
You actually had a beautiful word in Guilty by Definition that I recognised from Spanish. I think you were talking about trees, perhaps birch trees, and you said it was a susurrus.
Susurrus, yes.
Susurrus.
Beautiful.
Susurrar in Spanish is to whisper.
Gorgeous, it's whispering. Exactly that. It's from the Latin for whispering, and susurration is another way of putting it, but it's just the most beautiful word. It's one of the most mellifluous words, isn't it? The whispering of the wind in the trees.
Yeah, I'm taking that. That's becoming part of my vocabulary.
Great, I love that.
You know more about the English language than anybody else I know. Do you think you would know less if you hadn't exposed yourself to other languages?
For sure. Yeah, without doubt, I would not have been able to absorb the etymological information that I love so much without the filter of other languages. And just the sort of joy. I would miss so many of the connections and the threads that bind us all together. And I love the sort of really surprising ones where you just think, how did that happen? And as a word detective or linguistic anthropologist or archaeologist, whatever you like to describe lexicographers as, you are looking for those, the rationales behind a leap from one thing to another. And just to give you one of my favorite examples, which is one that kids always love, and you will know this one, is that the word muscles and the muscles of our body and mouse are connected, because to the Roman imagination, when they saw their athletes exercising in the buff, because they all exercise naked in order to show off their toned muscles, to the Roman imagination, someone flexing their biceps looked as if they had little rodents scuttling under their skin as it moved, and so they called a muscle a little mouse. And it's stuff like that. Kids always love that one, as they say. So you just think, how did that happen? And then you begin to imagine, even if you will never find the exact episode, because it's almost impossible to find the exact moment a word was born, apart from some of our firm expressions that are either literary creations or go back to a single event. But most of the time, we're just sort of trying to reconstruct a situation where that connection was made. Another weird one is the fact that a lasagna, Italian, first meant a chamber pot, because it goes back to the Latin lasagna, meaning a pot for cooking. But if you take it far back enough, it was a pot for something else. And so it may have been one episode when an Italian chef, a Roman chef, was criticised for the contents of his cooking dish, and someone likened it to the contents of a chamber pot. That may have been it. Who knows? But we will keep digging, because it's stories like that keep us going.
I also think learning other languages besides English gives you a great deal of open-mindedness.
True.
Because you suddenly start thinking, okay, a word doesn't have to always mean this, or an object can have many names.
Yeah.
And I can remember being in a book signing queue with you, and a lady came up to us and she said, I love your work because I'm such a grammar Nazi. And one, I think it's brave to say you're an anything Nazi.
Yeah.
And two, really, I think that's a misunderstanding of what a language lover is or does. I know there'll be many people who see loving a language as kind of Puritanism or pedantry. That's not how you love language. You have this real open mind for slang, for words that you feel have kind of wrongfully fallen into disuse, new words that are being coined in ways that might challenge how we've seen English being formed in the past.
Yeah. Look, we're never going to as I say, all the changes to language. That we're always going to see areas that we wish would remain constant or weren't being eroded, or that would, if we don't like them, would be replaced altogether. So we'll never be able to militate against that. There's no linguistic government, even though people long for it smack quite often. But yes, people will often say, it's so lovely to meet you because I hate what's happening to English. And that's always a sort of slightly different one, because I understand absolutely where they're coming from. There is that resistance to change because it's stability, and the whole world feels like it has none of that at the moment. But equally, stability doesn't mean being frozen. Stability can just mean the ability to flow freely. And with that, nerd that I am, literally 2 words have just popped into my head, because I was talking to Alan Carr about this the other day, that for some reason, and don't read too much into this, that the words diarrhoea and the River Rhine are related, because it's all about flowing through. That's what happens. Flow goes off in my brain, and then all these sort of like connections just are sparked, and that's what makes me weird.
The next time I have a tummy ache, I'll think of this beautiful
the River
etymology.
Rhine. Exactly. It kind of lessens the pain.
And brilliantly, one of my favourite things about English is we don't have a language police. We don't have like the Académie Française.
No, we don't. We have no. I mean, people have longed for it for a long, long time, but we've always resisted it. And actually, they don't really work anyway. It's very hard to police language, and I understand the desire to sometimes, of course, particularly when it comes to insensitive, aggressive, insulting language. I totally get where people are coming from, but we have never had an academy that will ban certain words. And many people resist slang being in the dictionary, for example, because they see it as a improper form of language. But actually, the best description of slang that I've read is from Carl Sandburg, a linguist, who said slang spits on it, rolls up its sleeves and spits on its hands, and it gets to work. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's a legitimate form of language. It's just not useful in some contexts, not appropriate in some contexts, but it tells us so much about the people who use it.
I love that. Apparently someone did once try to set this up for English and they failed, and it was John Adams.
Right.
So it was an American.
Who, yeah. The whole sort of connection between US English and British English, and the desire for independence linguistically as much as anything else, is fascinating. Yeah, that's as I say, a whole different discussion.
Susie, for every guest that we have on Word for Word, I invite you, you'll see there are infinite pins. I invite you upon this globe to pin the languages that shaped you. And it's totally up to you how many pins you use.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Tell us where you're pinning.
I'm obviously the British Isles. How do you get a pin in? There we go. I just like all over Europe, really. I'm going to go. I can't get good. Can you do Germany and France for me? Oh God, I would do Australia.
I'm pinning in the middle.
Okay.
Although you may feel a particular affinity. Did you spend time in Germany?
Germany. I lived in Germany. I lived in Berlin. I mean, the thing is, I've never been to Australia, but I am fascinated by Australian English. I could honestly pin the whole globe in terms of where is fascinating.
It's also the legacy of English, isn't it, that you're describing? That's why you can pin the whole globe.
I could, exactly, because it's everywhere. I would do the east coast of the US because that's where I studied. Yeah, honestly, how long have we got?
Not long.
But no, I think you've got the main ones.
Okay.
And yeah, but in terms of the dictionary, we're talking about everywhere.
We'd cover it.
Yeah. Yeah. English has begged, borrowed, and plundered words from every single continent and tongue it has encountered. And so it literally would be studied like an orange at Christingle.
You mentioned it at the top of this interview, the decline in studying foreign languages in the UK. And if you had one message for listeners after listening to this podcast, after hearing about how many languages have been part of your career and love affair with English and using English, what would you say to someone who maybe remains undecided on whether they should pursue other languages besides English?
I would say you will never regret it. Don't just see it as a tool for a career or, something sort of heavily pragmatic from that point of view. There's just obviously it can help massively, but it's so much more profound than that. And it will open up so many doors in your mind that you will never close. And this is a bit of a cliche quote now, but from Wittgenstein, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. But I say the limits of my languages are the limits of my world, because they take you anywhere.
Thank you so much, Susie.
It's always a joy.
Joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Word for Word. This is a Viralect original series recorded at Casa Italiana in Clerkenwell, filmed by Omar Mehtab, executive produced by Seren Jones, and, well, everything else by me, Sophia Smith Galer. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and social media by searching Word for Word Podcast. And if you like this episode, subscribe to my channel, or copy the link and send it to a friend or relative that you think will enjoy it too.